Yeah, exactly. She knew right away. She said her podium's coming back. And I'm like, yeah, it is. This is mine.
And thanks so much for the badge, so I could take that off before I come up. Good morning, and what a wonderful way to spend a Saturday. I look forward to this event every year and applying all the knowledge that I learned throughout the day. It's always such an inspiring event. So on behalf of Criterion, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. She will certainly get you energized and thinking. Misti Burmeister is one of the most down-to-earth people you'll meet. She's a best-selling author, entrepreneur, innovator, and TEDx speaker. Her groundbreaking work has armed leadership teams from Johns Hopkins and Johnson & Johnson to the EPA and the US Navy, with best practices for leading diverse teams through change. Today, Misti is going to offer her best insights, strategies, and practices for re-engaging the resigned. There are a limited number of copies of her book available in the lobby, and she'll be available to sign them as well. Misti, the Women's Center would like to honor you with the Leadership Award for your dedication to inspiring leaders. Please welcome Misti Burmeister.
All right. I guess we Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Am I on my, oh, there we go. Hi. Speaking of rock on, which, Renee, I love you. Everybody, why don't you stand up? Everybody, why don't you stand up? We're going to get the energy going in the room. Here's what I want you to do. Watch me first and then do it. Grab a partner real quickly. Watch me and then you do it. Watch me and then you do it. You're going to take the energy from your feet. Don't go down any further than what you can handle, okay? I know. It's been a long time since you've been standing, all right? You're going to take the energy from your feet. You're going to bring it up through the air. And at the very top, you're going to say, rock on as you high-five your friend. Okay? On my count. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Rock on. Yeah. Go ahead, take a seat. These ladies are like, I don't want to sit anymore. I don't know if I can make it through this. It's just 20 minutes, I promise. I was 14 years old when I first moved to this little tiny town called Gilchrist in Colorado. Anybody from Colorado out there? All right, nobody. All right. I'm alone. Great. Somebody knows somebody from Colorado? All right, great. Thank you. Woo-woo. The previous 14 years of my life, we moved about every 12 to 18 months. 2 years before, I was put into special ed or special needs program. And so when my mom and I, we go to a brand new high school, she takes me to meet with Mr. Weiser, who's the principal of the school, so that she could explain to him about all my issues so that he could put me into the proper program. So I'm sitting here, and my mom's sitting here, Mr. Weiser's sitting across the desk from us. As she details for 60 minutes all of my issues, I was like, do you have anything more? Mr. Weiser listened to every minute of it. And at the very end, he looks at me and he looks at my mom and he says, Miss Burmeister, I think your daughter's quite normal. I think she's going to get along just fine here in our regular program. Changed my life that day. I didn't think, guys, I wasn't even supposed to graduate high school, much less go on to get a master's and 2 undergraduate degrees. I didn't know my times tables. I didn't know what a pilgrim was. Some of y'all don't either. Okay, got it. I didn't even know what social studies was. That day, Mr. Weiser taught me a lot about engagement. The previous 14 years taught me a lot about resignation. Right? One of the greatest challenges today in attracting and retaining and engaging employees is resignation. But how do we go from resigned to engaged? From resigned to engaged. Well, first we have to really understand what resignation really is. So let's take a deeper look at that. Well, there's another slide that's coming up, and it'll come up when it does. Not that one. Well, that's fine. We're just going to leave that one right there. 24 million Americans, we're looking at Resigned, right? So 24 million Americans between the months of April and September 2021 resigned. 34 million pieces of data were gathered from Glassdoor. You guys know Glassdoor? Yeah. By this company, Revlo Labs, sifted through all 34 million pieces of data and came out with the top 5 reasons that people retire. That too. But resign. And so I'm not sure why the slides aren't advancing. We're just going to keep talking. The top 5 reasons that people resign. Number 1, toxic culture. Now, I would argue that every single one of these that come after are really related to toxic culture. But number 2, we have a lack of resources, skills, abilities, time, right? So we also have a lack of recognition or appreciation for a good job. And then number 4, job insecurity. And finally, number 5 is a poor response to COVID. Now, when I look at all 5 of these, what I see is a lack of safety. Now, the 5th one is the only one that's not really focused on psychological safety. The top 4 are focused on psychological safety, a very important component of our time together today. How do we create that safe environment for others? So, how is it that we go from resign to engage? We talked about needing to really understand what these 2 words really are. So what is resign? When I did research on this, there's lots of data out there and definitions about resignation, but basically it means, in the nut of it is, there's a belief that there isn't anything that we can do to make a difference in a negative outcome. So then what does a resigned person look like? They tend to be, let's see if it comes up. They tend to be negative. They tend to engage in gossip. They are very often, they don't speak up. They don't share their perspective. So that's what a resigned person looks like. Now let's look at what a resigned team looks like. For the past, you like that? For the past almost 20 years now, I've worked with dozens of resigned teams and helped them to become engaged. I actually had the great privilege of working with Renee and her team back at the EPA. This work is not new to me. I love it. And the top 3 things that I've seen during this time is that teams that are resigned they gossip a lot. They don't have difficult conversations, which is probably why they gossip a lot, right? They hoard and hide information. So that's what resign looks like. Anybody out there ever been resigned? Know somebody who's been resigned? Maybe you're thinking about resigning? Everybody in here, right? I remember my very first job out of college. I was working for a government contractor in Bethesda, Maryland. My very first job. And the very first contract that I worked on, I got the opportunity to interview cancer patients. And so I interviewed them, I wrote their stories, I'd get there early, I'd stay late. I loved the work. I got lots of acknowledgement for it. Well, that contract ended. The next contract came on. All the rest of the contracts that came after that were all meeting planning oriented. So now all of a sudden I'm in charge of large-scale meetings. Y'all, I didn't know Excel spreadsheets. I didn't know budgeting. I'm like, what am I going to do? It's my first job. I need to succeed. So first I go over to a colleague and I'm thinking maybe she could help me. For a whole variety of reasons, that didn't work. So I go take an Excel spreadsheet training, right? And that was a hilarious story. Tell you about that at another time. But that didn't turn out well. So I started researching the company, and I read every document they put out into the media in the 25 years they've been in business. and presented like I am for you right now to the CEO of the company, show her everything I knew. Maybe she could use me differently. At the end of that presentation, she looks at me and she says, Misty, what did your parents do to deal with you? It's clear you have problems with anxiety. Do you take medication for that? I resigned the next day. And I took my enthusiasm elsewhere. She didn't need to lose my enthusiasm. She needed to help me channel that enthusiasm. Right? So that's resigned. That's what resigned looks like on a team, an individual. Now let's look at engaged. Now, when I first looked at this word engaged, eventually the slide's going to come through. I'm saying that out loud because I think that they can hear me and then they're helping me. Maybe if I just push it 5 times more, anyway. So when I first looked at this word engaged, I was doing some digging, like what does this word mean? What did I first see? To be married, right? So you're dating, now you're engaged, to be married, right? Which is kind of an important part of the bigger piece, because you've got a goal that you're trying to do together as a team, right? And so when I looked at employee engagement, what I saw over and over and over again were these 3 words: committed, dedicated, and enthusiastic. What's the difference between committed and dedicated? I don't know. But enthusiasm, this word, did you know enthusiasm actually comes from the Greek word theos, which literally means God. So somebody who's enthusiastic is allowing what comes to them to come through them. We need a whole lot of safety inside and out for that to happen. So a critical component of engagement is psychological safety. All right, so an individual who is engaged, what do they look like? They're eager, they're present, they speak up, they share their perspectives. Now, if we look at a team that's engaged, I think we all want to be a part of an engaged team. So a team that's engaged, they're collaborative. They engage in healthy discourse. Y'all, we are not the same, thank God. We all have different backgrounds, different experiences. People who are part of an engaged team, there's healthy discourse that's happening, right? They're positive, they're growth-oriented. We talked about engaged, to be married. Where are we going together as a team? What are we striving to achieve together as a team? Makes a tremendous difference as we go into this new space of work being both at home and in person. Another critical element, psychological safety. All right, so how do we go then from resigned to engaged? So now we know what they are, right? So how do we go from resigned to engage? Well, I contend that it is through empowerment. Empowerment facilitates engagement. Empowerment facilitates engagement. But what does that even mean? The word empowerment, I love this word. In the center of it, you have power. Now, empowerment has 2 different perspectives for me, 2 different elements to empowerment. The first one is authority. Think of like flexibility, the ability to make decisions. Think of the support and the encouragement, the resources and the skills that we need to be successful in our jobs. That's one side of empowerment. And this side actually often makes me think of Rich Sheraton, who's the CEO and co-founder of a company called Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Any Michigan people here? Ooh. Anybody know somebody from Michigan? I got your back, all right? This company's been awarded gobs of awards for its company culture. But previous to starting Menlo Innovations, Rich actually, he tells this story often. He brought his daughter with him to work, and he's a senior vice president at a technology firm. And he brought his daughter to work. You know, for Bring Your Daughter to Work Day? And so while he was in meetings, she would hang out with Rich's employees. At the very end of the day, they're just the 2 of them, they're sitting there, and he asks her, sweetie, what'd you learn today? And with pride in her voice, she said to him, Daddy, that nobody can make a decision without you. He was mortified. And suddenly he understood why he couldn't take a vacation. Nobody could make a decision without him. So there's this quote by Stephen M.R. Covey, which is, there's nothing that motivates or inspires people like having trust extended to them. How are you trusting the folks on your team right now? In which ways are you extending trust to them, giving them the opportunities? All right, so that's one side of empowerment. Let's look at the other side of empowerment. Help them to see and let's see what it actually. Help them to discover and express their strengths. Keyword, strengths. It is so, our brains are wired to look for the negative in everything. We have to work at looking for the positive, for the strengths in others. That's what Mr. Weiser did for me. Everybody before him, weaknesses. Mr. Weiser, strengths. So the Gallup organization, perhaps a few of you are familiar with Gallup, has done for decades research on engagement. And here's one of the studies. 67% of employees who strongly agree that their managers focus on their strengths are engaged, compared to just 31% whose managers are focused on their weaknesses are engaged. So 67% engagement focused on strengths, 31% engagement focused on weakness. That's literally a 50% increase in engagement just by shifting our focus from weaknesses to strengths. Many of us already know our weaknesses way too well. We need help to see our strengths. So maybe you guys, actually Don Clifton, who is he is the first chairman of Gallup, says this: nothing happens until somebody expects something of you in ways that you can achieve. In ways that you can achieve based on your strengths. Perhaps a few of you guys remember this guy. His name's Andrew Carnegie, and it's just going to magically show up because that's how we're in conversation back there. Andrew Carnegie is a great steel manufacturer, right? During his time, he was the wealthiest man in the world. At one point, actually, he had 37 millionaires working for him. By today's standards, that's probably billions. Don't count on me. Remember, I didn't know my times tables. I'm still working on the math thing. The media caught wind of this and interviewed Mr. Carnegie. They asked him, how is it that you got 37 millionaires to come work for you? He said, oh, no. They were not millionaires when they got here. They became millionaires as a result of their time here. Well, how is it then? They asked him. How is it that you develop people such that they're worth millions of dollars to your organization? Mr. Carnegie said, you develop people much the same as you mine for gold. He said, you don't go in looking for the dirt. You go in looking for the gold. Gold, greatness. Dirt, self-limiting beliefs that stop us. And we all have self-limiting beliefs that stop us. It is the ones that help us to focus on our strengths, that help us to stand in our own power. Remember, it's an empowerment that facilitates engagement. So in summary, I want to share with you the top three strategies for engaging the folks for increasing engagement in the folks on your team. Number one, look for ways to give them. Start this today. Write this down. Look for ways, starting today, to give them authority, encouragement, support, the resources that they need. Look for ways to give them that today. Number two, focus on their strengths. What you appreciate, what you focus on, what you appreciate, appreciates. Focus on their strengths. And finally, number three, which I would contend is probably the most important of all of them, mostly because people just don't understand this. Focus on problems with people, not people as problems. Focus on problems with people, not people as problems. Now I want to close with this final story. I believe it takes a lot of courage to stand in your own power, much less to extend it to another person. So about 7 years ago, I was having excruciating pain in this hip. And a friend of mine suggested I learn how to swim. Now, I mean, I could keep afloat, I could doggy paddle, but not stroke, stroke, breathe, right? I didn't even know what a swim cap was for. I was like, what's this? I'm about 3, 4, 5 weeks into learning how to swim when Yvette, my wife, and I, who's actually right there at the back of the room, I'm sure she was happy that I pointed that out as an introvert. I'll be hearing about that later. So we go off to Rehoboth, Delaware for a weekend away, and while we were there, we went stand-up paddleboarding in the Rehoboth Bay. You guys know this, right? Stand-up paddleboarding? Been out there for maybe 5 minutes when she suggested that we could swim half mile across this bay, that I could swim across this bay. And in our relationship, I'm the crazy one, not her, so if she thought I could do this, you know I was going to give it my best effort. So I grabbed my swim cap, my goggles, and I proceed to inhale gobs of salt water as I made my way across the bay, stopping every 2 or 3 strokes to catch my breath. She's following me on the paddleboard. Well, finally, I make it across the bay. And you guys, my hand goes across the biggest fish you can possibly imagine. It was definitely a shark. I start to panic. Yvette notices my panic and says, flip over onto your back, so I do. And when I did, I could see she's at least as concerned as I am about the shark, and really, what good is that paddleboard gonna do for me? So I start to chant to myself, it's okay, I'm okay, it's okay, I'm okay, it's okay, I'm okay. In the middle of the chanting, she takes her paddle and she's poking the bottom of the bay. She says, Misty, I think what you're feeling is the bottom of the bay. So I summon up the courage, flip back over, and sure enough, it's that muckety-muck at the bottom of the bay. And of course, just a week before, I saw that Survivor TV show where they show you how to get out of the mud that will suck you into the earth, and if you don't do it just right, you might die. Start to panic all over again. Yvette goes to take off. She's like, I'm done with this. And I said, wait a minute, just stop. Stop everything. I'm afraid of mud. So I dive to the bottom of the bay and I scoop up the nastiest vat of mud I could get my hands on. It was real delicious. And I bring it to the surface and I said, here, have my fear. And she's like, you're nasty, and she takes off. Gone. But for me, I watch as my fear sunk to the bottom of the bay. And then I took off like crazy to catch her. And you guys, I caught my first stride ever. I swam the entire length of that bay without stopping even once. And that is the power of what's possible when we release our fears of our own power, as we stand in our own power and extend it to others. Remember, it is empowerment that facilitates engagement. Thank you so much for having me today. Oh, she said
So anyway, so we do that. Yvette, it is finally great to meet you after probably 10 years. From this distance, this is 6 feet, right? I'm obeying that. Misty, thank you so much. First, one point of help. Pilgrims never made it to Colorado, so it's really okay. Thank you, too, for your messages. Above all else, safety first, physical and psychological. It will go a very long way. So rock on, my friend Misty. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Misty, for finding and discovering your own strengths and expressing them here with us today. You've brought a couple of books, and I think you'll be available for book signing. Is that still a yes now? I'm waiting for a slide that gives me a correction. Actually, Yep, she's got a few books here, but please avail yourself to that opportunity.
Hey guys, I just want to let you know that while the books are sold out, you can get Provoking Greatness. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that sells books carries my book. Thank you.